I'm Isabel Winters, 47, divorced and living alone. I've spent my life working hard, building a sense of independence I thought no one could touch, until my sister decided to humiliate me in front of everyone at what was supposed to be a simple family dinner. That night, I learned that even your closest family can turn against you, and that sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to take control. I stood in the restaurant lobby, my winter coat still buttoned to my throat, when the hostess's confused expression made my stomach drop. Her manicured finger traced down the reservation list, then stopped. "You're listed as the primary reservation holder, Ms. Winters." Behind me, my sister's voice cut through the ambient chatter, cold, deliberate, loud enough for the elderly couple by the door to hear. "She's not invited." I did that on purpose. The entire family turned to stare at me. The hostess's pen hovered over her clipboard. "Should I cancel the reservation? Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one. Every share helps these stories reach someone who needs to hear them. Let's keep the conversation going." My sister, Natasha, stepped forward, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. "This is a family celebration," she announced, voice projecting like she was addressing a board meeting. "And she makes things uncomfortable." Strangers waiting for their own tables glanced our way. My mother studied the floor tiles with sudden fascination. My father adjusted his tie 3 times in 10 seconds. I looked at each family member, searching for someone to defend me. No one met my eyes. My brother-in-law shuffled his feet. My niece pretended to check her phone. This wasn't confusion or misunderstanding. This was coordinated silence. They'd all known. Every single person standing in that lobby had known I wasn't supposed to be there, and not one of them had warned me. The hostess cleared her throat nervously. "Without her confirmation, this party can't be seated," she said quietly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Natasha's confident expression faltered for just a moment. I remembered exactly why the reservation was in my name. This restaurant, Giovanni's, had been my sanctuary for 15 years. I'd celebrated promotions here, cried through breakups in the corner booth, spent countless evenings at the bar talking to Marco, the owner, about everything from wine pairings to failed marriages. When Natasha had mentioned wanting to host a special family dinner, I'd offered to help. I'd made the reservation using my name because Marco always held the best table for me. I'd planned to arrive early, make sure everything was perfect, then slip away before the meal started. That was the plan I'd been told. But standing there, watching my sister's rehearsed cruelty, I understood the truth. She'd used my connection, my relationship with this place, and then excluded me. Publicly. "Just leave before you embarrass yourself," Natasha whispered. I turned without another word and walked toward the door. Behind me, urgent whispers erupted. My mother's voice, "Natasha, maybe we should," my sister cutting her off, "She'll be fine." She always is. The cold November air hit my face as I stepped outside. My car was parked 3 blocks away, and each step felt like walking through water. I'd spent 47 years being the family ghost, present but never truly seen. I thought about my 10th birthday party that Natasha had turned into her dance recital showcase. My college graduation that coincided with her engagement announcement. My divorce that was too depressing to discuss at family gatherings. Every milestone erased, every achievement overshadowed, every pain dismissed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I stopped walking, standing under a streetlight, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. They still needed me to stay gone, I realized. They needed my absence to complete whatever narrative Natasha had crafted. I answered the call. "Ms. Winters? This is Antonio, the floor manager at Giovanni's." His voice carried both professionalism and genuine concern. I apologize for the confusion. The hostess informed me of the situation, and I need to clarify, the reservation is in your name. We cannot seat the party without your explicit authorization. Silence stretched between us while I processed this information. "They're asking if you'll come back," Antonio continued carefully. For the first time all evening, I felt the power shift. Not because I wanted revenge or to cause a scene, but because suddenly, the truth was unavoidable. My sister had built her exclusion on a foundation that required my cooperation. Without me, her perfect evening couldn't happen. Give me a moment to think, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Antonio agreed immediately. Of course. Take all the time you need. I leaned against a brick building, my mind flooding with memories. Last Christmas, I'd bought and wrapped every gift my parents gave to Natasha's children, but she'd thanked them effusively and never mentioned me. 3 Thanksgivings ago, I'd cooked for 2 days, and Natasha had arrived with store-bought pie and received all the praise. My father's 70th birthday party, I'd paid for the venue, and she'd taken credit for organizing everything. This wasn't one dinner. This was decades of quiet exclusion, of being the family workhorse who was never invited to the celebration afterward. I'd absorbed it all, telling myself it didn't matter, that being the bigger person meant letting things go. But standing alone on that cold street, I finally understood. I'd never been the bigger person. I'd just been smaller, shrinking year after year, making room for Natasha's ego to expand. I decided not to go back. Not yet. First, I needed them to understand what they'd done. Inside Giovanni's, according to the text I received from my cousin Brielle 10 minutes later, chaos had erupted. My sister was pacing near the hostess stand, her composure cracking. The guests, including family friends and Natasha's colleagues, were growing restless and openly hungry. The hostess had explained the situation to Antonio, who'd explained it to Marco, and now the entire staff understood. The woman they'd just publicly humiliated was their most valued client. My parents had retreated to a corner, arguing in tense whispers. My father kept gesturing toward the door. My mother pressed her fingers to her temples. Brielle's text continued. Your sister is losing it. She's demanding they seat us anyway. Marco just told her that's not possible. This is wild. My phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed my mother's number. I stared at it, watching it buzz in my hand, feeling nothing but a strange, distant calm. I answered. Sweetheart, my mother began, her voice carrying that particular tremor she used when asking me to sacrifice something. Please don't ruin this. The words I'd heard my entire life. When Natasha had borrowed my car and returned it with a dent, don't ruin this. When she'd told my high school boyfriend I was cheating, don't ruin this. When she'd announced her pregnancy at my wedding reception, don't ruin this. Mom, I said quietly, I've never ruined anything. I've just stopped absorbing the damage. She inhaled sharply. What does that mean? It means I'm not coming back to fix this. I'm letting it be exactly what it is, honest. I could hear my sister's voice in the background, shrill and demanding. My mother's breathing quickened. But everyone's here. The food is ordered. You're being selfish. That word. Selfish. For standing up after being publicly rejected. I have to go, I said and ended the call. 20 minutes passed. I sat in my car, heater running, watching my breath fog the windows. My phone rang 7 more times. My father, my brother-in-law, even Natasha herself, though I let that one go to voicemail. Finally, I made my decision. I drove back to Giovanni's, parked, and walked into the lobby where my family still waited, their faces now showing various shades of anger, embarrassment, and desperation. Antonio saw me first. His expression brightened with relief. Ms. Winters, thank you for returning. I nodded to him, then addressed the room in a clear, calm voice. I'll release the reservation so you can all eat. But first, I need the manager to acknowledge something publicly. Antonio straightened. Of course. What would you like me to say? The lobby fell silent. Natasha's face flushed red. I need you to announce who the actual host of this reservation is, I said simply. Antonio didn't hesitate. His voice carried across the lobby, clear and formal. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin seating your party once our host, Ms. Winters, confirms the arrangements. Every eye turned to me. The weight of their stares felt different now, not judgmental, but uncertain. My sister's confident smirk collapsed into something uglier. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You're doing this on purpose, she hissed, stepping toward me. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in earshot. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. My father moved as if to intervene, then stopped, perhaps finally recognizing that his usual peacekeeping wouldn't work here. My mother's eyes were wide, her mouth forming a small O of shock. She'd expected me to fold, to disappear quietly, to protect everyone's comfort at the expense of my own dignity. I met Natasha's glare without flinching. "No," I said softly. "You did." I repeated her words back to her, each syllable deliberate. "You said I wasn't invited on purpose." The guests began whispering among themselves. My sister's friend, a woman I'd met twice, touched Natasha's arm uncertainly. "Tash, I don't understand. What's happening?" Before Natasha could spin some explanation, my cousin Brielle spoke up from the back of the group. She excluded her own sister from a family dinner. Her voice carried disappointment. "Why would you do that?" The question hung in the air. Natasha's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She looked to her parents for support, but even they seemed frozen, finally seeing how this looked to outsiders. "It's complicated," Natasha stammered. "She and I have history." Another guest, a silver-haired man I recognized as my father's golf partner, frowned. But she made the reservation. She clearly wanted to help. The logic was inescapable, and I watched it dawn on face after face. People started noticing details they'd missed before. Who had stayed quiet when Natasha announced my exclusion? Who had looked ashamed? Who had looked cruel? My brother-in-law, usually so jovial, studied the floor with intense focus. My nephew, only 12 but old enough to understand betrayal, stared at his mother with confusion. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't need to. The truth was sitting in the room like a third presence, impossible to ignore. An older woman from Natasha's book club approached me hesitantly. "I'm so sorry, dear. I had no idea. If I'd known." She trailed off, but her mortification was genuine. I nodded, accepting her apology. The lobby had become a courtroom where everyone could see exactly what had happened and who had been complicit. Then Marco himself emerged from the dining room, wiping his hands on his apron, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile when he saw me. "Bella," Marco exclaimed, using his pet name for me. He crossed the lobby and pulled me into a brief, fatherly hug. 15 years you've been coming here. 15 years of celebrating with us, crying with us, laughing with us. He turned to address the group. "This woman, she helped my daughter with her college applications. She brought customers when we almost closed during the pandemic. She's family." My sister's face had gone pale. She genuinely hadn't known. In all her calculations, she'd never bothered to learn about my actual life, my real relationships, the places where I was valued. Marco gestured toward the dining room. "Your usual table, Bella? The one by the window. The table everyone wanted. The table reserved for special occasions. The table Natasha had certainly requested for this evening." I saw her process this information, saw the reality crash over her like a wave. I wasn't just a customer here. I was a VIP. I was respected. I was loved. My parents realized something in that moment, too. I watched it happen on my father's face first, a crumbling of assumptions, a recalculation of dynamics they'd always taken for granted. They'd backed Natasha publicly, automatically, the way they'd done for 47 years. But now, in front of my father's golf partner, my mother's bridge club friends, and Natasha's professional colleagues, the choice looked different. It looked cruel. My mother reached for my hand. "Sweetheart, we didn't know. She said you were busy tonight, that you declined." Natasha's head snapped toward our mother. "Mom, don't." "Is that true?" My father interrupted, his voice harder than I'd heard in years. He was looking at Natasha now, really looking, perhaps seeing her clearly for the first time. My sister's expression cycled through emotions too quickly to track. Finally, she settled on defiant. "She makes everything about her." "I wanted one night, I interrupted quietly, where you use my connections but not me." The choice crystallized in front of me with perfect clarity. I could smooth this over. I could laugh it off, make some self-deprecating joke, release the reservation, and let everyone eat their expensive meals. I could sacrifice myself again, the way I'd done countless times before. I could be the bigger person, the smaller person, and let Natasha have her evening. My mother's eyes pleaded with me. My father's jaw worked silently. Even Marco looked torn, wanting to support me but also wanting to serve the meal his kitchen had prepared. I won't pretend anymore, I said, my voice carrying through the lobby. I won't pretend this is okay, that being excluded and then blamed for being heard is acceptable, that I'm the problem for finally saying no. I turned to Antonio. Release the reservation. They can eat if they'd like. But I'm leaving. Marco's hand on my shoulder stopped me. Bella, you have nothing to be ashamed of. I smiled at him gratefully, then walked out into the night. I drove home through blurred streetlights, my eyes burning but tearless. Behind me, according to Brielle's increasingly frantic texts, the dinner was collapsing in slow motion. Half the guests had made excuses and left, unwilling to participate in a celebration that now felt tainted. Those who remained picked at their food in uncomfortable silence. Natasha had tried to salvage the evening with forced cheerfulness, but her laugh sounded hollow, desperate. My parents barely touched their meals. The chocolate cake Natasha had special ordered sat untouched, its 50 candles. It was supposed to be my birthday celebration, I realized with a jolt, unlit and forgotten. By 8 o'clock, the party had disbanded. Brielle sent a final text. Everyone's gone. Your sister is furious. She's blaming everyone but herself. Your parents look devastated. I sat in my quiet apartment, my coat still on, and felt something I hadn't expected, peace. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:15. Natasha's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. You overreacted, she said without preamble. No hello, no acknowledgement of the previous night, just accusation. You made me look bad in front of everyone. My colleagues, my friends, people I have to work with. I listened to her blame shifting, waiting for an apology that never came. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? She continued. Marco treating you like royalty, mom and dad questioning me, people leaving early. You ruined everything. The words rolled over me without impact. I'd heard variations of this speech my entire life. Whenever I'd stood up, whenever I'd pushed back, whenever I'd made Natasha face any consequence for her actions. I'm not apologizing, I said calmly. You're not, she sounded genuinely shocked. You excluded me on purpose, Natasha. You used my name, my relationships, my connections, and then publicly humiliated me. I'm not apologizing for that. Silence. Then, you're being dramatic. I'm being honest, I corrected. Let me tell you what I see, I continued, my voice steady. I see 30 years of you taking credit for my work. I see birthdays where I planned everything but wasn't thanked. I see holidays I funded but you hosted. I see my wedding reception where you announced your pregnancy. I see my divorce that was too uncomfortable to mention. I see every single time you've erased me and I've stayed quiet because keeping peace was more important than keeping dignity. Natasha said nothing. I could hear her breathing, quick and shallow. I see last Christmas when I bought all the presents for your kids and you never mentioned me once. I see Thanksgiving 2021 when I cooked everything and you brought pie from the store but got all the compliments. I see Dad's birthday party that I paid for but you organized. I see it all, Natasha. My voice cracked slightly. And I see you using my restaurant reservation to exclude me from a family dinner on my own birthday. After I hung up, I sat in silence for nearly an hour. Then my phone buzzed with a text from our Aunt Vivian, my mother's older sister. I saw everything last night. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Can we talk? 20 minutes later, my cousin Brielle called. I've been watching this pattern for years, she admitted. I should have said something. I'm saying something now. By afternoon, 3 more relatives had reached out, people who'd witnessed the restaurant scene or heard about it. They all said variations of the same thing. They'd noticed, they'd stayed quiet, they were sorry. That evening, my parents called. Together on speakerphone, which felt both formal and frightening. Can we come over? My father asked, his voice stripped of its usual authority. An hour later, they sat on my couch, looking older than I'd ever seen them. My mother twisted her wedding ring. My father clasped his hands between his knees. We enabled it, my mother said finally, the words emerging like a confession. Not maliciously, not intentionally, but we enabled it. My father nodded slowly. You were always so capable, so independent. Natasha needed more attention, more help, more everything. It was easier to lean on you because you could handle it. We told ourselves we were treating you equally, my mother continued. But equality isn't letting one child hurt another without consequence. They both looked at me with raw vulnerability. What do you want from us? My father asked. I'd imagined this conversation for decades, but now that it was happening, the anger I'd expected felt distant. What remained was exhaustion and clarity. Distance, I said quietly. Respect. Or nothing. My mother flinched. Distance. Space to heal without being told I'm overreacting. Respect for my boundaries without being called selfish. Or nothing. I walk away completely and build a life where I'm actually valued. They absorbed this in silence. Over the following weeks, the family fractured along unexpected lines. Aunt Vivian and her family chose Sunday dinners with me instead of the traditional gatherings at my parents' house. Brielle started a group chat that included me but not Natasha. My father's golf partner, surprisingly, reached out to apologize for his silence and invite me to a charity fundraiser. But others chose comfort over confrontation. My brother-in-law sent a brief text. I'm sorry about everything, but Natasha's my wife. I can't take sides. 2 cousins stopped responding to my messages. My mother's best friend blocked me on social media. The division wasn't clean or easy. It was messy and painful and complicated. But it was also clarifying. I learned who had courage and who had convenience. Natasha watched her social circle shrink and her narrative crumble. She'd expected everyone to move on, to forget, to let it blow over. Instead, people remembered. They whispered. They chose. 3 months later, at a family birthday party I wasn't initially planning to attend, everything came to a head. Brielle had convinced me to go, promising Natasha had been humbled. I arrived late, slipping into the backyard where the celebration was already underway. I saw Natasha notice me, saw her expression harden. As I talked quietly with Aunt Vivian, my sister's voice suddenly rang out over the crowd. Hey, everyone remember the reservation incident? She was smiling, but her eyes were cold. When certain people decided to make a scene instead of just going home quietly, the backyard went silent. She tried to reclaim the story, to make it a joke, to rewrite history one more time. But no one laughed. My cousin Marcus, usually neutral in family conflicts, stepped forward. You mean when you publicly excluded your sister, and then got mad when she didn't stay excluded? The silence deepened. Natasha's smile faltered. That's exactly what happened, Aunt Vivian said firmly. Someone near the grill changed the subject, deliberately steering conversation away from Natasha and toward me. I left that party after an hour, but something had shifted fundamentally. Not in a dramatic explosion of confrontation, but in a quiet recalibration of family dynamics. At the next gathering, someone saved me a seat without being asked. At another, my opinion was sought and actually heard. Small moments, subtle changes, but to me they felt revolutionary. No yelling. No screaming. No dramatic speeches or tearful reconciliations. Just a shift in how I was treated, finally. Natasha and I existed in careful parallel, attending the same events but orbiting different social clusters. We were cordial when necessary, distant by default. My parents tried to bridge the gap, but eventually accepted that some rifts don't heal, they just scar over. I realized something powerful in those quiet months. I didn't need Natasha to apologize. I didn't need my parents to choose me over her. I didn't need the family to formally acknowledge my worth. I just needed to stop diminishing myself to make room for their comfort. I stopped chasing approval from people who'd shown me, repeatedly, that they wouldn't give it. I stopped explaining myself to those who'd never bothered to ask questions. I stopped attending places where I wasn't genuinely welcomed, where my presence was tolerated rather than celebrated. Marco threw me a proper birthday party at Giovanni's 6 months after the incident, with people who actually wanted me there. I started painting again, something I'd abandoned years ago when Natasha had called it a cute hobby. I adopted a dog, traveled alone to Portugal, learned to make pasta from scratch. Peace arrived where rage used to live. Not because everything was resolved, but because I'd stopped waiting for resolution. The anger that had sustained me through that first confrontation gradually transformed into something quieter, acceptance that some people won't change, and freedom in no longer needing them to. I was 47 years old and finally learning to take up space. A year after that night at Giovanni's, I sat in my favorite corner booth with Brielle, splitting a bottle of wine and sharing tiramisu. The restaurant hummed with conversation and clinking silverware. Marco waved from the kitchen door. Through the window, I could see my own reflection superimposed on the city lights beyond, no longer the ghost I'd been, but solid, present, real. This was never about a dinner reservation. It was about finally refusing to disappear, to shrink, to apologize for taking up space in my own life. The reservation was just the moment the truth became unavoidable, when all the years of quiet exclusion crystallized into one undeniable scene. The moment I stopped cooperating with my own erasure, everything changed. Not instantly, not completely, but enough. Natasha thought excluding me would make me small, would put me back in my place, would remind me of the family hierarchy we'd all accepted for decades. Instead, it exposed everything. Her cruelty, their complicity, my worth. She thought I'd disappear. I became visible instead.